Welcome back to The Science of Turning Back Time, where we explore the science and the strategies that help us extend our health span, not just lifespan. Today I'm meeting a guest who I have been relentlessly hunting down for a good reason, which I will soon share. But I'd like to welcome Leslie Kenny, who's an Oxford-based longevity expert and also a graduate of the very prestigious University of California, Berkeley. I'll let Leslie tell her story, but she has personally reversed a diagnosis of lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, and infertility as well, giving birth naturally at the age of 43. And we'll talk a little bit about your biological age as well, Leslie, in this episode as well, which is something we discuss quite a lot on the podcast. But welcome. Really excited to have you here today.
Thank you. It's a real pleasure to be on this podcast. And as I said earlier, before we started taping, I am such a fan of functional medicine practitioners, and I personally know the benefit that they can offer to patients as partners in healing and optimizing health.
Yeah, so I think it's going to be a really interesting conversation today. A lot of what we're going to be talking about is spermidine, because that's kind of the thing I'm really interested in. But I know that you've dedicated your life to really looking at the science of lifespan longevity. And just making that really accessible. So I know that you're the founder of Oxford Healthspan, the company that does Primeadine, and we'll talk a little bit about that as well. But yes, I think longevity is kind of your thing, right?
Yeah. Well, let me just go back a little bit. I mean, first and foremost, I'm a patient advocate. I think I'm living proof that you can be given a terrible diagnosis, which I was. So at age 39, I was told I had 5 years left to live. I was in the middle of my 5th round of IVF at that time, using donor eggs. So I had negotiated quite a lot of my expectations around motherhood, but somebody giving me a hard stop and saying, don't proceed with this embryo transfer because you're going to die in 5 years, that was dramatic. And it really made me appreciate the value of the immune system and understand acutely how important it is to bring the body back into balance, not overreact and start destroying our own tissues. So, as I said, age 39, that was 21 years ago. So I'm age 60 now. I was really just focused on becoming a mother. I think that's something a lot of us can appreciate, especially if we have waited. In my case, I was 39 and I'd been trying for probably 5 years at that point in time. And I didn't think at age 34 that it was too late. But unfortunately, and I've seen this with a lot of other lupus and rheumatoid arthritis patients, some of these autoimmune conditions they're really stealthy in the beginning, and you don't appreciate that you have them until they've bedded in. And unfortunately, just like McDonald's Happy Meal prizes, you collect one and you start collecting the other autoimmune conditions too. So I had noticed while I was in the middle of this 5th round of IVF that my hands were hurting, and I was actually cutting Christmas decorations out of cardboard and stringing little pieces of thread through, and thought, oh, that would be so cute. But the pain in my hands was excruciating. And then I noticed that I couldn't turn doorknobs so well, and I was having trouble turning faucets, and decided I'd better have it checked out. And that's when my doctor's office ran a bunch of tests, and I got a call. Unfortunately, not from the nurse to say all the tests were fine, but from the doctor who said, can you come in? We need to have a talk. And she gave me gold stars for predicting it was arthritis. It was rheumatoid arthritis. At that time, I didn't even know about osteoarthritis. I thought they were all the same. That's how far from my mind it was. And then she said, you've also got lupus. Now, with the rheumatoid arthritis, we can stop your body from damaging your joints anymore by giving you these immune suppressing drugs. But for the lupus, unfortunately, there's nothing that can be done. And you're just going to have to expect it to get worse and worse over time. And when I asked, was there any kind of lifestyle change I could make? What about my diet? What about my sleep? What about movement? She said no. However, on these immune suppressing drugs, I would have to make one lifestyle change, and that was to avoid people and crowds, because in crowds of people at parties, churches, the cinema, I would be in contact with viruses, uh, the flu virus, for instance, and I would be more prone to getting cold and flu and not be able to fight it as well because now I was suppressing my immune system. In particular, she said I needed to avoid small children because they harbored germs,
Mhm.
which, again, just what? Yeah, how could this actually be? And again, if you really, really desperately want a baby, this is not what you're thinking uh, is how you want your life to be. So I left that appointment and realized that as a patient, I had a choice. I could either agree with what she was saying. And again, I really had no understanding of what these diseases were, they were so remote. Uh, or I could investigate the heck out of them. And luckily, as an IVF patient, I had learned to rely on patient bulletin boards. So I went back to the patient bulletin boards, but this time for lupus and rheumatoid arthritis. And this is where I heard from other RA patients that the immune suppressing drugs I was on would probably fail in 18 months, and my doctor would cycle me on another immune suppressing drug. And it was like an unending hamster wheel of new immune suppressing drugs. And so that it didn't instill a lot of confidence in me. And then over on the lupus bulletin boards, I heard patients talking about a study that had been done 4 years prior in 2000 in Germany. There were only 13 lupus patients, but they had used something called intravenous immunoglobulin. It's a transfusion of antibodies donated from anywhere from 3,000 to 10,000 volunteers. And this was previously given to patients who could not create their own antibodies. But what they were noticing was that it was an immune modulator. So that means that it's almost like an adaptogen for the immune system. So we think of ashwagandha, rhodiola as adaptogens. They kind of, if your hormones are too high, they bring them down. If they're too low, they bring them up. So IVIG was modulating the immune system and resetting it, bringing it back into balance. And because both of my grandparents had gone to medical school in Japan, I had always been taught that the body is beautiful and complex, but it always has an innate wisdom to heal if we can bring it back into balance. And so when I heard about IVIG, I thought, this sounds like what I need to do. So I organized that. My diagnosing doctor refused to give that to me. So I hunted around for a doctor who would, using the patient bulletin boards as a way to find sympathetic doctors. And I urge anyone, if your doctor is not giving you the answers you want, please search for another one. We probably spend more time researching and hunting for cars than we do doctors, right? So don't just accept who you have, really advocate for that. So I found that doctor, got 2 rounds of IVIG organized. And at the same time, I thought, well, it's common sense that if there are things in my life that are activating the immune system, triggers, I need to remove them. So I did an allergy test. I discovered that gluten, dairy, and eggs were problematic. I removed all of those. I went with a lot more plants in my diet, fewer high glycemic index fruits. So I was looking at the work of Dr. Barry Sears in the United States. He had a book called The Anti-Aging Zone. And so just trying to keep a very low glycemic index diet, low inflammatory diet. And I did absolutely everything, super motivated. I did trauma therapy. I was hiking regularly. I was doing yoga regularly. I tried to optimize my sleep. I quit my job. I mean, trying to live became my full-time job. And fast forward 6 months, I go back to see my doctor for a routine appointment. Of course, they're always checking the biomarkers of your illnesses, in this case, cytokines and tumor necrosis factor alpha. Um, and the doctor opened my file and just said, well, look at that. You don't have lupus or RA anymore. And she didn't look up. I just said, excuse me? And she repeated it. And I said, oh my gosh, that's amazing. Do you want to know what I did? And she said, no, that's okay. And she never looked up. She never made eye contact with me. And that was when the penny dropped.
Wow. Wow.
Right? Because I thought, well, wait a second. 6 months ago, you said I was going to be dead in 5 years. If I had listened to you, I would have rolled over. I would have just prepared for that demise. Now, the IVF cycle I was going through did not succeed, but several years later, when a different doctor in the UK, Dr. Barry Peatfield Durant, a thyroid expert, diagnosed me with low adrenal and thyroid function and treated me, I fell pregnant naturally within just a few weeks. And he predicted it. He said, now that your hormones are going to be back in balance, I was using Armour desiccated thyroid. Now that your hormones are back in balance, you're going to be hyper fertile. So if you don't want any more children, I had adopted a little girl from China at that point.
Hmm.
He said, you'd better take precautions. And I thought, you must be kidding me. But he was right. And the low thyroid, so interesting, nobody had ever diagnosed it. Why? Because I had been sent to a rheumatologist, and rheumatologists only deal with things like lupus and arthritis. They're not allowed to diagnose endocrine dysfunction. And, I'm thinking, so this is why I haven't been getting pregnant for all these years? And even once we figured out the two autoimmune conditions, nobody bothered to look to see if something else might be wrong. It boggles the mind that these different silos of the medical system, they refuse to talk to each other. It's just stay in your lane, right? So I was so thrilled to become a mother at age 43 and was just so blessed. So I have a very blessed life in that I got two wonderful children, one through adoption and one through natural fertility. For anybody out there who's wanting to have a baby at an older age, the best advice I can give is somebody who's gone through this and was told by the fertility doctors that, you're too old, your eggs are no good, it's not going to happen. Bring your body back into balance. Give it the things that make it stronger, remove the things that make it weaker, and just watch how it knows how to bring you back into fertility again.
But it's more than that, because I always say to people, when you are bringing a child into this world, you really want to know that your body's in that really optimal condition.
Yes.
So
Yes.
you're doing it not just to get pregnant. You're
No, of
actually
course. Of
doing it
course.
because the health of the baby depends on it. And for decades down the line, we know that maternal health will have an impact on the child well into their 50s and 60s.
Yeah, 100%. And thyroid function is, I think, quite often overlooked in this country. As you may know, they're only allowed to diagnose based on blood. And the two tests that they usually give you are TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone, and T4. But actually, the receptors that we have in all our cells are for T3, the bioavailable hormone. And there are quite a number of people, myself included, who have a genetic mutation on the DIO2 gene where we do not convert T4 into T3 well. And for us, we look normal. because we're producing plenty of T4, but guess what? We're not converting to T3. So you do have to ask your doctor for that extra test, which they are often reluctant to do. And then just to make things more complicated, sometimes our body feels that we're under threat, that perhaps maybe we've done too much fasting or we're under too much stress, but the body says this is not a good time to bring a baby into the world. There's not enough food, not enough resources. So it pumps out something called reverse T3. And that reverse T3 sits on the T3 receptors and blocks the bioactive T3 from getting to the receptors. So that's another thing to look for, is your reverse T3 levels. So all of these things that I've learned kind of the hard way, but with a happy ending. I'm always trying to share these, these hard lessons I've had to learn with other women, because I do see that it's a lot harder to get diagnosed with hypothyroidism, or even to be tested for Hashimoto's in the UK. And frankly, it upsets me.
It's an incredible health story. I love stories like this, where people have overcome quite significant health challenges despite, what they have been told, kind of what the predicted outcome will be, which is amazing. But tell us a little bit about, I mean, you say you're 60,
I'm
which is
60. Yeah.
unbelievable looking at you.
Well, I have some grays. You can see here on the camera, there are a few grays there, so I don't dye my hair. But yeah, so I'm 60, but last year when I did a biological age test with glycan age, I got the result back at age 21, which sort of, again, it sort of shocked me. But hey, I'm living proof. Look what you can do, right? Work with your body. Again, take away the kryptonite and give it all the good stuff that nourishes it. They always say, think of yourself as you were. You should treat yourself the way you would treat a 5-year-old version of yourself. Well, that means not giving your body a lot of ultra processed food. That means making sure that your 5-year-old self is getting out there and getting some movement, is going to bed at a sensible hour, isn't binge watching, I don't know, slow horses or something. But yeah, it's sometimes we forget to take care of ourselves, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about HealthSpan and kind of how you've moved into this area. Yeah, how have
Well,
you?
so I was, picking up my daughters at, in the school grounds, waiting around with all the other parents. And because Oxford is a university town, we have a lot of medical researchers here. And I would fall into conversation with other parents and ask what they're doing, and find their work utterly fascinating. And sometimes say, gee, that sounds like a really cool therapy. How do people take advantage of that? Maybe I have a friend or they have a child who might benefit. And the answer just kept coming back the same over and over. Oh no, I just want to publish. I'm not interested in commercializing this. And I realized that it's very much publish or perish here. And scientists are quite reluctant to get bogged down in business affairs of which they know nothing, and they also don't want to know anything about it. And they're usually not money driven. And it could also be that maybe that's a British thing. The Brits don't like talking about money, whereas Americans, we can talk about it, right? So I decided to hold up my hand and try and fundraise for some of these companies in the regenerative medicine space. These are often unloved parts of the university because regenerative medicine is all about cure, right? This is not about we're going to manage chronic symptoms. No, it's about curing the patient. And for me, that's what I want. All of these pharmaceutical companies, that's so great. You can, mitigate symptoms. Usually you end up getting 5 other side effects that are unwanted, right? So I started doing that. And it was through working with Oxford Science Enterprises, which is a big fund here, that the head of the biotech portfolio said, rheumatoid arthritis, there's some really cool research happening at the Kennedy Institute for Rheumatology with, with these wonderful female scientists. Why don't you meet them? So I met Professor Katja Simon and Dr. now Professor Gada Al-Saleh, and they had done some research with a really awkwardly named molecule called spermidine. And we all, before people jump to conclusions, we all make it, men and women. As a matter of fact, in women, we make a lot of it in breast milk. And when we're young, we are full of it because it helps us grow. But it's also anti-inflammatory, and it activates a process called autophagy or autophagy, however you want to pronounce it. They're both correct. And that just means cell renewal. And it can also activate mitochondrial renewal through a process called mitophagy, and it can sequester viruses through a process called virophagy. So it's a pretty impactful compound that actually inhibits 9 of the 12 so-called hallmarks of aging, so the pathways down which we get older. And the idea that longevity scientists are working on is, how do we slow down the pace at which we age? How do we inhibit those hallmarks? And that is what one of the great things that spermidine can do is it can inhibit so many of the hallmarks of aging. It's why the New York Post called it the Swiss Army knife of longevity, because it does so many things. And by the way, with autophagy, a lot of people are familiar with it because it's one of the benefits of fasting. But if you are an older person, let's say my mother, who is 86 and weighs about 80 pounds, she's so slender. She, came to me and said, "Oh, Leslie, I heard about fasting. I'm going to do this. This is good for me." And I said, "No, Mom, you can't do this, because the first thing that's going to happen when you fast is your body's going to go for your muscle. And if you do that, there's such a penalty to pay. It's a very short-term gain." Well, the beauty of eating a spermidine rich diet, or supplementing with a food-derived spermidine, is that you activate autophagy. So you get that cell renewal and mitochondrial renewal benefit, but you don't jeopardize the muscle. So classically, other things that activate autophagy, like rapamycin, they activate autophagy, but they do it by inhibiting something called mTOR. mTOR is just, I like to think of M as meaning muscle. So the door to muscle. And when you inhibit that door to muscle, that's not good as we get older, because we want to maintain as much muscle as we can going into this third stage of our life, as we go from 60 to 90. So that's, one of the many amazing things about this strangely named molecule. And one of the reasons why I was willing to go to bat as being the kind of educator around spermidine, even though it's got such a weird name, I just thought people need to know about this. And I think now they're starting to hear about it. But food sources first and foremost. Really try to emphasize that. Do not think that a pill or supplement is going to, change things miraculously. Please, please, please do the work on your diet, and then you can supplement.
I like that. And we'll get to what the food sources are in a minute.
Yeah.
I'm always very suspicious of one compound that does a lot of things, like
Yeah.
your Swiss Army knife. But spermidine has been like one thing that I've been curious about for a while. So as part of the podcast, what I do is I track my biological age and experiment with a whole lot of different things, and then kind of get an idea of what is working and what's not working. So spermidine had been on my radar for quite a bit of time. But in June, I was at a conference where there was quite a lot of buzz around it. And I was sitting with a colleague of mine, and she said, "Yeah, spermidine reversed my gray hair." And I was like,
Yeah.
"Sure, I believe you, right?" Um,
Yeah.
like we know that once that's once it's gray, that's it. It doesn't really reverse. But part of the podcast, I was like, I'm going to try Spermidine. I measure a whole lot of biomarkers, including my biological age as well, see what happens. And the most bizarrest thing is that my gray hair has reversed. And
No.
I mean, like,
Well done.
completely mind blowing. And so I do color my hair. I go to a really lovely chap who uses organic hair color.
Well
Um,
done.
and I was having to go about 3 because organic hair colors don't last as long as the
Yeah.
kind of toxic
The
stuff.
harsh ones. Yeah.
Yeah, so I was needing to go about every 3 weeks. And last time I went, because just for lots of reasons, I was traveling and all kinds of things. I didn't get to go for 6 weeks. And he was like, "Have you gone somewhere else to have your hair colored?"
Have you gone somewhere else?
Yeah.
I
So
love
he
that.
immediately thought that
I
I was
love
being
that.
unfaithful and going somewhere else.
I love that. I
I
love that. I'm
know.
actually going to write
So
that down. Have you
I'm
gone somewhere
I'm just
else?
honestly stunned. And as a result, I was like, I need to really, look into the other actions of spermidine more. And then that's why
Mm.
I've been hunting to get you on this podcast for a while.
Oh, thank
Um,
you. Well, so one of the things that in particular Primeadine original, what it will do, and we know this from studies in Japan where we source it. It increases not just keratin, which is useful for the production of the hair shaft, but it increases tyrosinase, and that's needed for melanogenesis. And then, of course, spermidine itself has been shown in other studies with older human hair samples. These are from facelift patients. We can see that if we add spermidine in a petri dish with those hair follicles, that within 6 days, around 25, 27% of those hair follicles will move from the telogen or shedding phase back into the anagen or growth phase. And the anagen or growth phase is the only time that pigment production happens. So I would never say that this is the only thing or this is guaranteed to happen. It's not always the case. But of course, you, I am sure, as a practitioner, have been keeping your body in good shape in many other ways. So you've done all the other work and you know if you're too low in iron, if you're too low in B vitamins, if you're too low in vitamin D or too low in thyroid hormone. These are the classic reasons why people
yeah,
also can experience premature gray hair. So for you, getting the addition of this was the kind of missing piece. And I'm so excited to hear that. I love stories like that. And honestly, it can happen at any age. There was a 79-year-old woman who, I've said this on other podcasts, she wrote to us and said, look what's happening. And she showed a picture and it looked like a kind of Alice headband on the top of her head with white hair. And I was like, that's amazing. You've hit the holy grail. Look, your hair color is coming back. And she said, I think this would only happen in Britain, not in California. She said, all my friends are going to think I dye my hair and that I'm vain. That was so funny. Yeah,
that
of
is
course, in
I love
California,
that.
they'd be cheering. They'd be getting their bikini out ready to, look at me.
So funny, the cultural difference.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
but the interesting thing for me was, thinking about it, of course, like from a vanity point of view, it is really, really nice
Yeah,
to, see the change in hair color. But
yeah.
it isn't about vanity. It is about,
No,
for me, it's an indicator that whatever the process was that led to the graying,
yeah,
perhaps is changing. And what does that mean on a whole body level? And what does it mean in
exactly.
terms of
Yeah,
generally aging? And, I
yeah,
always say that the number one risk factor for so many of our illnesses is actually aging, right? Just
yeah,
the
yes,
actual process of getting older
yes, it
puts you at
is.
higher risk for cardiovascular disease, dementia, all of these
Yeah,
things. So if aging, and we take away the vanity part of it, because if it makes um, the British feel uncomfortable, we take away the vanity and just think about the part of, keeping your body in a healthier state for longer, so that you
yeah,
maybe spend, I mean, I think I saw some statistics which said, on average, the most of the British population will spend the last 19 years in poor health, right?
It's
So
terrible. Yeah.
it's
And
awful.
women more likely than men, right?
Yeah,
Because we live longer. Yeah.
exactly. And if it just means keeping your health and vitality, so not even necessarily increasing lifespan, but making sure that the quality of life that you have is good. So yeah, absolutely. I think
Yes.
anything that's going to kind of help that process along in the long run.
Yeah.
Um,
And this is, our hair, skin, and nails. People say, oh, this is vanity, or, oh, just get a facelift or dye your hair. Do you know these are external markers of internal health. If you're in East Asia, and I know you're an acupuncturist, so you'll appreciate this, in East Asia, they do look at how a patient presents. What about their nails? Are they ridged? What about the hair on their brows? And we know that these hair tag signs, if you lose the outer third of your eyebrows, that's a sign of hypothyroidism. And what about eyelashes? You lose your eyelashes? Oh, just get fake ones. Actually, no. This is an indication that things have changed internally. And with spermidine, there are certain parts of the body that are always going to have first call on spermidine. So we don't store it in our tissues. It's water soluble, just like vitamin C. So we need to continually get it from plants. Overwhelmingly plant. You can only get it from two meat sources, which are chicken or duck liver, of all things. But we need to constantly replenish it. And organs, our vital organs, have first call on this spermidine that comes in. Now, for instance, cardiomyocytes, these are a specialized pool of cells in our heart that basically govern the rhythm of the heart. We don't actually replace many of them throughout our lifetime, which means that we need to maintain them like vintage cars. So I always say mine are like 1965 Mustangs. You got to burnish the chrome, change the tires, make sure the oil is topped up. We have to do that with that pool of cells. And guess how we do that? Through autophagy, through cell renewal. And that's what the spermidine in our diet will actually do. Um, but as we get older, the need for those levels of spermidine go up at the same time as tissue production goes down. So around age 26, tissue production goes down. Then we're reliant on our gut biome to manufacture it. If you've been exposed to broad spectrum antibiotics, guess what? You may have wiped out some of those populations of beneficial bacteria that can make this. Then you're really reliant on plants. And how many of us are diligent about getting plants into our diet, right? So then the pool of spermidine in the body, the amount of this for hair, for heart, is not so high. And the body will always vote for survival of the organism. That means whatever we have goes to the heart, or it goes to the brain, or it goes to the bones, not the hair, not the eyelashes, because they're not necessary for the survival of the organism, right? So, we do have a lot of clients who say, oh, I love it because of my hair, skin, and nails. But in fact, they're missing the part about the beautiful part that's happening on the inside. That is much more important.
Absolutely. And fruit sources, your plant fruit sources, what are they?
Um, Mushrooms, legumes, wheat germ, but always get fresh. It's just like with nuts. Make sure that you get a source that has properly kept the temperature of the wheat germ, like nuts, low, so they don't go rancid, because about 50% is actually omega-6 fatty
Yeah.
acid. Um, Cheese. So always give a shout out to the cheese makers in the Cheddar Valley. You can get it in cheddar cheese, Parmesan cheese. One idea now that it's winter and it's kind of mushroom season around Europe, you can have a nice risotto.
Mm,
And with some Parmesan cheese, the closer to the rind, the more spermidine, and get a bunch of mushrooms. Now, not necessarily your button or your chestnut. What you're really looking for is shiitake
okay.
and oyster. These are the two that are really good. And interestingly, those two both have something called ergothioneine, which gets rid of the so-called old person smell that the Japanese have done research on. Um,
I
yeah,
did not know that. That is interesting.
so you know how teenagers have all those products are about breaking up sebum. We have sebum in our skin throughout our lives, and we have, as we get older, the sebum in our skin actually begins to oxidize, and that when it oxidizes, it's kind of like rancid nuts or rancid wheat
Mm.
germ. It begins to give off a smell more in men than in women. Sorry, guys.
Mm.
And washing does not do it. And so you really need to be able to get ergothioneine into your diet, and that's through eating more of these mushrooms. So there is a soap that the Japanese have developed, and I think it uses persimmons to do this, but it's not easy to come by. So, get the mushrooms. They're good for your gut biome.
Definitely a mushroom risotto coming up tonight, I think.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly.
So,
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about the product that you've got, the Primeadine, because you're sourcing it from Japan. Am I right?
Yes, I am. We were so lucky to work with two great partners. One is on the mainland of Japan, and they have worked with us to develop a spermidine source from wheat germ where we actually remove the omega-6 fatty acids that can
Oh.
go rancid.
Mhm.
And because those actually become part of the outer cell membrane, and you don't
Oh.
want rancidity there. Um, so they take it out and then they add back in a fructooligosaccharide. What is that? That's a prebiotic fiber. And I talked about how breast milk has a lot of spermidine. Well, guess what? About 50% of it is fructooligosaccharides. Not there because the baby can digest it, but just to feed the bacterial colonies that the mother has bequeathed to the baby as it has gone through the birth canal. And so we have added in this fructooligosaccharide to help bring your gut biome back online again. Because, again, as a patient, why wouldn't you try to turn that little pharmaceutical factory in your gut back on again, right? So let's try
Mm.
and do that with this prebiotic fiber. So that's one product, that's Primeadine Original. But then people heard about my autoimmune story and said, hey, unfortunately, gluten, even though it has a very small amount of gluten, gluten is a lectin. And lectins are terrible for autoimmune patients. Classically, lectins are in things like nightshade plants, potatoes, aubergine, courgette, peppers, but gluten is the most famous one. So what are you going to do about it? And I really had to think hard about this. What would be a good source? It wasn't easy to get from mushrooms. So I looked for a plant material that had high spermidine, and that was chlorella. But I needed to get the minimum effective dose that had been shown to actually improve memory in human clinical trials. So that's 1 milligram. And I tested over 100 different substrains of chlorella in order to identify one that was uniquely high in spermidine. Bizarrely, for chlorella, it doesn't have any iodine. Most chlorella has iodine. This one doesn't. But took that, and I also took some Okinawan lime peel, which, just like bergamot lemons, has another compound that activates autophagy called nobilitin. A lot nicer name. And then I added in some Okinawan autumn turmeric. And I visited all these farms. I met the farmers with the chlorella. That's actually, I have to commission that. I think I'm the only person in the world that commissions a substrain, but that's done in a freshwater pond using spring water from a volcanic source in Okinawa. And that pond is not in the ocean, but it's on land. So it was actually really an honor to be able to create something that other autoimmune patients could use, frankly.
That sounds incredible. And I can really attest that it does work. I
Oh,
haven't tested
thank
my
you.
my biological age again since starting. So that's definitely on the cards for the next few months. I can purely
Yay.
just see it in my hair color, which is great. So yeah, I mean, so exciting. You know, it's exciting to find something that works because, and I think this is also one thing that a lot my patients will say to me all the time. I'm popping all these pills, and like, how do I know if it's making any difference? How do I know if it works? So it
Yeah.
is nice to
Yeah.
see, visibly,
Yay.
mm, uh, um, yeah, I guess some feedback from the body that things are.
Yeah, I think I'm so excited about that. I mean, again, I always say to people, I want to manage people's expectations. Please remember that gray hair has multifactorial roots.
Mm,
It's not always going to be just one thing, but if you've done everything else right, and you are regularly checking for deficiencies in vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, and hormones, and you're in balance on all of those, and you still have it, then this could be that missing piece. And yeah, I feel so honored that I can help in this way because it does give a boost. When you look in the morning and you see that there's less gray or that your eyelashes are growing longer. For me, that was the indication, oh, hey, this stuff works. That was about the 5-week mark for me. But I had been doing, I thought, everything else right. And just the addition of this one thing, even though I did eat mushrooms and, was getting lentils, I was making lentil soups with turmeric. This was just
right.
that little extra bit.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it really does follow the functional medicine model of, getting the pillars of your health right. You have to
100%.
get all those, your sleep, your exercise, your stress balance, your nutrition. All of these things have to, this is not a shortcut.
Yeah.
And it is an important idea that we always bring across in the podcast as well, is to say there's no magic bullet. There's
Yeah.
no, one pill that you can take that's going to magically do all of this. It is really about lifestyle and getting all of these pieces right. And then it is nice to just have a few little things that you can add in that are going to, I guess, just take it up another level, another level.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. And I do find it so funny that when we take care of our cars, we think it would be ridiculous if somebody said, oh, all you have to do to make your car run right is just to fill it up with gas or petrol. No, we all know, oh no, the gas has to be topped up. The tires need to be balanced. You need to have windscreen wiper fluid. There are all sorts of other things you need to do to make a car work right. And yet with our own bodies, we're like, oh, what's the one thing? I only want to do one thing. We're so beautifully, mysteriously complex. How could we ever think that we would be less complex than a car?
Yeah,
Right?
absolutely. Absolutely. So I'm going to ask you if you're
Yeah.
okay to tell us this.
Yeah.
Talk us through your daily routine.
Ah, well, I wake up and I will either have matcha with coconut or almond milk, or I will have a coffee and I add a little bit of collagen, a little bit of medium chain triglycerides from coconut. Um, and then I will add a little bit of hushawo, which is a Chinese herb. And let's see, sometimes, although I'm trying to reduce my iron levels, because I recently tested as being a little high on those. I will sometimes add in a little bit of raw cacao with some lion's mane. And that comes from a really cool company called the Bristol Fungarium.
Oh,
I like their hot chocolate. Yeah. So I just add a tiny bit of that and mix that up in a blender, and then after that, I will have my morning stack, which is super important for me because that's my armor or ERFA thyroid. Sadly, you cannot get it on the NHS. And I have to get that done privately. But that actually has the bioactive T3 in it. I will take some adrenals as well, lamb's adrenals. And let's see what else is in there. I have my bioidentical hormone replacement therapy. That would be the estradiol, and that is something that I put in my cheek pouch. So it's not we're trying to get it to absorb into the bloodstream. So it's a little bit of a different delivery method. Then, I do try to, if I'm lucky, I will try to get some words into a journal. And that's based on the work of Julia Cameron, The Artist Way, which I love, right? Just pour out whatever is coming out of your mind when you first wake up, because it's usually uncensored and very creative thoughts. Um, and then I'll work for a few hours. But I'm very lucky to live in North Oxford, and I can cycle into the Bodleian Library. That's the one with the big round Radcliffe camera, the library, and I can actually work there. And I like to sit in the Tudor history section. That is actually all of that library. That round bit is all history. So I can sit there and I can work there. And then I can cycle back into town. And I'm walking wherever I'm going. Maybe I'll go to get, a tea or something, but I can walk. And this functional movement, which my friend and also Oxford, citizen Wendy Welpton, she talks about functional movement quite a lot. So I'm getting a lot between cycling and walking around town. And if I'm doing calls, my company is completely um, we're all online. There's only one other person here in Oxford with me, three in London, and a couple in overseas in Spain. And it's wonderful to be virtual, because as a woman, I have a lot more free time. I can go to drive to Cheltenham, where my daughter's at university, or I can meet my youngest, who's lower sixth. I can meet her for coffee, and it's great to have that flexibility while still being engaged in what for me is really meaningful work, trying to make things better for people. Um, I do have an afternoon stack of supplements, and these are based on what my doctor, who sees me every 6 to 9 months, which she says based on my own personal deficiencies. So please don't take what I take. Please work with someone like Charmaine to get your deficiencies or imbalances identified, and then you top up those things that work for you. Just like you wouldn't just want to wear my shoes because our feet would be different sizes, do not think that you can take my supplements. um, but one thing that is in there are 3 detoxifiers of estradiol. So for excess estradiol that might turn into a less good form, so DIM, calcium D-glucarate, and N-acetylcysteine. I also take some glutathione. So those 4 are pretty consistent since I've been on BHRT. And then in the evenings, I have a wonderful stack for sleep. And the progesterone from my BHRT is there. And that's Utragest, which you can get on the NHS. And then I have a little astaxanthin, I have some melatonin, and I have Primeadine. Excuse me, I have Primeadine GF, 2 of those, because that's got the nobilitin also works with the spermidine to positively impact 2 of the clock genes that helps us sleep better.
I like the
And
try that. So yeah,
yeah,
I'll definitely move mine to the evening.
yeah, it's quite nice. And then I have a drink, which is Mega Mag,
Oh,
from now Metagenics, but used to be Nutri Advanced. That's a powder, tastes like lemons. And then I add in my Primeadine original powder in there, mix that all up, take my evening stack, and I'm done. And I get great sleep. I get, usually on a bad night, I'm getting an hour of deep and an hour of REM, but almost always I get an hour and a half of deep sleep, which is for me very, very valuable, because that's when our glymphatic system works and takes the toxins out of the brain.
fantastic. I love that. Well, I've received an email from one of your team, which is Georgia, and giving our listeners a 20% discount if they wanted to try Primeadine, which is quite nice. We'll drop the information into the link below. Um, But that's been fantastic. I'm very, very grateful for your time. I'm very grateful that I managed to pin you down for
Oh, thank you. I'm so happy to have heard your experience, and again, just so happy to meet a practitioner who shares my philosophy of, really working holistically to bring the
Mm.
body back into balance. And I think we must have that partnership with our practitioners, and really thrilled about that. If I may make a shameless plug, I'm also co-founder of a nonprofit called the Oxford Longevity Project, and we have a conference that we do every year in Oxford. So we'll be at Rhodes House on Saturday, the 9th of May next year, 2026. And it's going to be about diet this year.
Oh,
And Dr. Chris Van Tolken, who wrote Ultra Processed People, is going to headline for us. So we're very excited to have him.
yeah.
He's also an Oxford alum. But last year we had the wonderful Angela Rippon, and this year we have Chris Van Tolken. So we our conferences are all about learning, but becoming part of a community. So we move every single hour. You're not just sitting there. And all the food we serve is all healthy. And there are all sorts of gluten free options. We do chia seed puddings and overnight oats, and these are the
Right.
little snacks. We don't serve any alcohol because I don't think that's good for us. Um, but it's a really fun time. And if any of your listeners want to come down and make a weekend of it in Oxford, you can even book a room in Rhodes House. So that could be really, that could be a really fun event for people.
That sounds just up my listener street. I think I'll be there. And
Yay.
if they want to find more information on that, where do they go?
OxfordLongevityProject.org.
Perfect. Amazing. I think that sounds really, really good. And I think even just connecting with like-minded people,
Yes.
people who share the same enthusiasm and passion for,
Yep.
for this process. I think that's a wonderful way to connect.
And we ask people to talk to their neighbors to say, what was your takeaway from that lecture? And we may even ask you to play patty cake with that person in a fun way, or get up and dance like we did last year with Angela Rippon. And for the Scots in the room, the wonderful Sir Muir Gray is my fellow co-founder, and he will be there with his wonderful Glaswegian charm to tell us all about how we should uh, live live longer, better. And he's the author, famously, of Sod 60, Sod 70, and now Dr. Gray's Walking Cure. So we'll be very inclusive for everyone in the UK, not just the English.
That's fantastic. Leslie, thank you again for your time. Very much appreciated.
You're very
Um,
welcome.